Yes, good morning, everyone. I want to make a live stream this morning, and it is about a topic which I have discussed at the Speed of Sounds channel a few times, which I think is a very important topic in regards of the odds to have a functional proteome for starting life. And I think this topic alone is a checkmate for any abiogenesis scenario. And any seeker which looks at the evidence in a honest manner will acknowledge this. But of course, if an atheist has an emotional commitment to materialism and naturalism, he cannot acknowledge this, because if he does, his card house breaks down. And I had this topic a few times at Speech Channel, but it is known for a long time that whatever evidence is given to them, it will not be accepted because of that, because they have an emotional commitment to materialism. But I want at this stream this morning go again to that topic, which is the odds to have a functional proteome and even just one functional protein on a prebiotic earth. So I will start showing here, reviewing two streams which I had an interaction at Speech Channel, and review this. And if someone wants to come in and reviewing these streams together with me, then be my guest. Here is the link. And so let's start and having a look at this here, and I will comment on it.
Hold on, it's hard to do though, because I don't have enough bandwidth to have both windows open playing videos. But so here's the thing: I stopped my search because it's funny. The exact same thing that I referenced is occurring right now on this stream. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Now, as Immutable just pointed out, Otangelo, you're the one who brought this paper up. And there was something in this paper that you were so willing to accept. You thought this was going to be proof to bolster your claims. And now that they're pointing out that you read it wrong, you are trashing the paper and saying, well, why would you believe anything in this paper? They're biased. You're the one who brought the paper to us.
I would say that John Peterson is the biggest ultra-crepidarian that has ever appeared at streams at Speed's channel. And he has absolutely no understanding of biochemistry, but behaved himself as he was the ultimate authority and entitled to criticize me. That was just ridiculous. But let's go on.
Now, can I explain what you got wrong, Otangelo, about this?
Go ahead.
10 to the 130th.
Yeah,
okay, this is called the sequence space. Okay, the sequence space is every possible amino acid. Okay, if we have 100 amino acids, then the size is 10 to the 130th. That's the sequence space. Now they looked at this.
No. That's wrong.
A minute, or I'll meet you. Okay. They looked at this sequence space, and everybody said, oh my God, life could not have possibly explored every sequence space. And to get from one functional protein to another would take a long time because the sequence space was so big. Well, this paper talks about how they reduce the size of that sequence space, and they're showing a reasonable pathway for why the sequence space doesn't matter. But even with that, now Axe himself had a paper from 1996 where he showed that 25% of one sequence space that he studied had functional proteins.
So this is a complete nonsensical claim. This is not true. I can put up the paper here, and then we can check what actually Douglas said. Okay. In the paper, Douglas X estimating the prevalence of protein sequences adopting functional enzyme folds. The likelihood of randomly arranging 153 amino acids into a protein domain, and the protein domain has a sequence between 50 and 250 amino acids that performed a similar function as B-lactamase, was on the order of 1 in 10 to the 77th power, similar to the chance of finding one specific atom in the universe. Combined with the estimated prevalence of plausible hydropathic patterns for any fold and of relevant folds for particular functions, this implies the overall prevalence of sequences performing a specific function by any domain-sized fold may be as low as 1 in 10 to the 77th power, adding to the body of evidence that functional folds require highly extraordinary sequences. So this directly falsifies what Speed claimed. It's not that about 100 sequences that 25% are functional. That's simply not true. It's 1 in 10 to the 77th power. So this alone demonstrates the extreme impossibility that a functional protein sequence would emerge randomly. So let's continue with the stream.
But what you saw here, all you saw is a number. You didn't read any of this paper at all. So you have no idea what it says. And you obviously didn't read that last line that criticized you directly for your big numbers game, proving divinity. And I mean, you brought this paper to us. Thank you, Otangelo. Thank you. I knew there was a reason why I let you in here. You're just wonderful.
I mean, and how beautiful is it?
Yourself.
How beautiful it is it?
So what did they do here? They basically went to the end of the paper, and then the paper attempts to disprove that evidence. And then they tried to criticize me that I didn't actually read the paper. Let's move on here.
That he tries to say that I'm saying something wrong when I brought up that earlier incident, and then he does the same exact thing right now. It's so fucking beautiful.
Time.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Thank you, Otangelo. You are such a treat.
It's basically just raw quote mining. I mean, there's no way you can. If the author is biased, there's no real reason to quote this, because this is just basically an opening phrase of a longer sentence.
Yeah.
A typical estimate is, that's all it's saying. And he goes down here and quotes all these researchers who are bringing us to the awareness that there are reasons why that number is way too large.
And out of that space, 10 to 130, there's probably 10 to the 90th, according to Douglas Axe, that are functional proteins. I mean, so it's a fucking gigantic space.
So again, here Speeds makes again the completely baseless claim that over a half of these sequences would be functional. That is simply not true. It is very clear in Axe's paper that it is one function amongst 1 to 10 to the 77th power. That means that one atom in the entire universe would be the jackpot, and all others would not be the jackpot. So that's what Speed tries to assert is simply taken out from hot air. It's not true.
But they're saying that that basically a lot of those don't matter because I think of the surface area. We're talking about surfaces or something like that.
Hey, Tangelo, Leo wants to know, and I'm not claiming I know, but he wants to know if you know what a sequence space is.
Of course I do.
Okay, what is
can
that?
I answer now?
Tell me what a sequence space is.
I answer that question now because I don't know what it is, and I'd like to know what a sequence space is.
Okay, if you have an amino acid chain of 100 amino acids, you have on each position the selection of 20 different amino acids.
Okay.
Because 20 amino acids are used in life. Okay. Now, if you want to have a particular sequence of 100 amino acids, where on each position you can select the most 20 amino acids, then you have 10 to the 130th power of possibilities to find that specific sequence. That is what sequence space is, okay?
No, it doesn't have anything to do with you only have to have one of those. It has to do with how many different protein combinations there are.
Wrong, Speed. That's exactly what Axe's paper says. It is just one sequence which is functional amongst 1 to 10 to the 77th power. It's not half as you claimed. Okay?
There's 10 to 130th different possible proteins. Out of those, probably 10 to the 90th are functional. They will do something. They will perform some function, according to Douglas Axe. And I'm just kind of ballparking.
Hey, CRISPR's hitting you up in the live chat there. He wants you to do something.
Have him read the last sentence of the results. Oh, we already did that, CRISPR. We made him.
No,
we
had him read the last sentence of the discussion, not the results.
How many did you say that are functional amongst these, Speed?
10 to
According
the 90.
to Douglas Axe said 10 to the 74th were functional protein space of 10 to the 150th. So I guess so we could say, okay, we'd say 10 to the 65th.
Can you show that? Because I didn't read that in his paper. Do you have it on hand?
You've quoted Douglas Axe saying that 10 to the 74th were functional.
No. What I understood in his paper is that what I understood in his paper is that if you want to have an amino acid chain, I don't remember the size of the sequence, then the sequence space would be 1 to the 10th to the 74th power, also an absolutely gigantic number. It's the number of atoms in the universe.
1 out of 10 to the 74th, but there are 10 to the 150th in the sequence space he was talking about. So if only 1 in 10 to the 74th are functional, that leaves a whole hell of a lot.
I didn't. Of course not. Of course not. I can put the paper here on the screen. We can have a look. Okay, what does it say here? The prevalence of low-level function in 4 such experiments indicates that roughly 1 in 10 to the 64th power signature consistent sequences forms a working domain. Okay, so again, the prevalence of low-level function in 4 such experiments indicates that roughly 1, not half, 1 in 10 to the 64th power signature consistent sequences forms a working domain. That means that there is just one domain or working domain which is functional in a sequence space of 10 to the 64th power. If we consider that 10 to the 22nd power is the number of stars in the universe, and 10 to the 80th power is the number of atoms in the universe, then you have an idea about the size of this number. It is so huge and enormous we cannot even imagine it. And we are talking here just about a working domain of a protein, which has between 50 and 250 amino acids, but a functional protein in a bacteria has an average of 300 amino acids. So we are still just talking here about the working domain of one protein. But in order to have a functional minimal free living cell like Pelagibacter rubique, you need about 1,350 amino acids. So this demonstrates the huge odds to have a functional protein and a functional proteome. And Speed and his gang, they simply ignored this evidence. This is knockdown evidence for abiogenesis. And any honest researcher and seeker acknowledges this and understands this. So they have not refuted absolutely anything about what I actually said. They are just ignoring it and trying to find excuses. You can read that, and I don't think this is true.
Yeah, well,
I don't think this is true.
Well,
You can show it to me
well, wait a minute. You said you didn't read it, and then I found it so precious that a moment ago you used the words "I" and "understand" in the same sentence. That's just irony. You can't buy irony like that. And now you're claiming to have read it, but you didn't read it. Like, what does that mean?
Okay, here's another one for you, Otangelo. I guess you do the. Do you want to read somebody?
Yeah, therefore it's entirely feasible that for all practical, functional, and structural purposes, protein sequence space has been fully explored during the course of evolution and life on Earth, perhaps even before the appearance of eukaryotes.
Yeah. Anyway, this is a pretty damning paper for you. You should never.
So what did they do? They simply took the conclusion of the paper and tried to refute the evidence. They didn't even look in the reasoning process of the authors of this paper. They just took the conclusion and blindly believed it. And that's not how you do a skeptical research with scrutiny. You actually read how they come to that conclusion. And if you read it, then you will see that the arguments that they provide are completely made up and nonsensical. Let's move on.
Never refer to this again, Daniel, because people are going to end up not believing your Bible.
Well, the thing is, so isn't that funny? This have to do with the Bible. Nothing. It was just about the I actually just tried or wanted to demonstrate the odds to have one functional protein on prebiotic Earth. And the number which I provided, that calculation anyone can do, and it is undisputed. But if the evidence is undisputed, then what does that mean? You can come to a deductive argument, to a logical and sound conclusion. And what is the conclusion? The conclusion is that the odds to have a functional protein and a proteome on a prebiotic Earth is it's such an astronomical huge number. And you have just simply to believe that this is possible by blind faith. And in another opportunity, I said to Speed, let's look before that we even can make such an attempt. When you have actually all the functional amino acids all together to make such a shuffling, previous of that, what you need is actually to have this set of amino acids which are used in a prebiotic Earth. And what it takes, Speed didn't want to go to that, probably because he already knows the huge problem to get that to get these amino acids readily available on a assembly place. In order to even try this shuffling, we can have a look on that. Then you can have a look about what we are talking about. Let me put that paper up, and then you have an idea here. Okay. Uncertainty, quantification of a primordial ancestor with a minimal proteome emerging through unguided natural random events. First of all, what has to be made clear here is that evolution was at that stage not a driving mechanism. Evolution only starts with DNA replication, and obviously you need the proteins and the DNA replication mechanism in place in order to have DNA replication. And it was there prior when life started. So everything that you have is a random, unguided chemical stochastic events. So the claim, the origin of life is overwhelmingly improbable, but as long as there is at least some chance of a minimal proteome to kickstart life arising by natural means, then we shouldn't reject the possibility that it did. And so here is my reply. Chance is a possible explanation for a minimal proteome to emerge by stochastic unguided means, and as a consequence, the origin of life. We cannot deny that it is a possibility, but it doesn't follow that it is necessarily the best explanation. So what we are looking for is what best explains the origin of the minimal protein set and the first proteome, which was required to kickstart life. And here is why. we can calculate the odds that a minimal functional proteome would arise by unguided random natural events, not considering all other essential things, to get a first living self-replicating cell. So here I am starting to list all which would be required before you actually start such a random shuffling of the amino acids to see if somehow you get the right sequence. Okay, so the first thing is we would have to assume that the conditions of the primitive atmosphere were known. And second, nitrogen and carbon in fixed form, necessary elements of amino acids, was readily available, and that all of the 20 amino acids used in life did form naturally, disregarding the lifetime of ammonia, which would be short because of its photochemical dissociation. So here already we have two huge problems. The first is to have nitrogen in fixed form, in the form of ammonia, which is required to have amino acids. Amino acids, they have atoms of ammonia incorporated or nitrogen incorporated in their setup. And nitrogen is available in gaseous form in the atmosphere. But we need very complex enzymes called nitrogenase, which fix nitrogen and make it available to the biosphere through ammonia. And of course, nitrogenase, which is a very, very complex enzyme, was not existent prebiotically. So this is a huge problem which is unsolved, up to the point that a science paper published in Nature magazine in 2016 claimed that the last universal common ancestor already had nitrogenase in its proteome. And that's because there is no alternative reasonable mechanism known which could fix nitrogen from the atmosphere. And lightning would not be sufficient to have the quantity required and concentrated enough so that life could take it up. And carbon is another huge problem. Carbon is in the form of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but it has to be fixed in order to make carbohydrates. And there are very complex metabolic pathways required to do that, which also were not extant on prebiotic Earth. So how do you explain that? That is another huge problem. That the smallest metabolic cycle, which is proposed as the first one fixing carbon, is the reverse TCA cycle, or the Wood-Ljungdahl cycle. And they have at least 9 proteins and enzymes in the cycle which are required to fix carbon. And of course, this was not available also prebiotically. So how do you explain the origin of these metabolic processes which are required? There is no reasonable explanation for that. And the third point, organosulfur compounds required in a few amino acids used in life would be readily available. So that's the assumption. What do you think, what you need to assume? And even if in nature sulfur exists only in its most oxidized form, and only some unique groups of prokaryotes mediate the reduction of sulfur 4 to its most reduced state, which is sulfide or H2S. So this is another barrier to have the amino acids which are required to kickstart life. And fourth, billions of each amino acids would be readily available even if 8 proteogenic amino acids were never abiotically synthesized under prebiotic conditions. So what you have to assume is that the 20 amino acids were readily available, and there is no prebiotic mechanism known for at least 8 of the amino acids which are used in life. We only know of metabolic pathways and enzymatic reactions in life which synthesizes these amino acids, and they were not available readily on the prebiotic Earth. So this is another huge barrier and a huge problem. Then fifth, the amino acids would be concentrated all together at one assembly site. So you can imagine that there were hundreds and hundreds of amino acids simply laying around on the prebiotic earth. But how do you concentrate the ones which are actually used in life to one assembly place? There was no mechanism to do so. That's another huge problem. There would be selected 20 and not more or less amino acids to make proteins. So if you have hundreds and hundreds of amino acids available and there is no selective process, you have a huge problem. How do you select the 20 which are required for life? You cannot simply say, oh, somehow it started with just 5 or so amino acids and then evolution did the rest, and somehow the set of 20 was selected and it was a slow evolutionary process. Well, no, there was no selective process around there. Why would random unguided forces select something? That makes simply no sense. So seventh, only the best suited would have been selected to enable the formation of soluble structures with close-packed cores, allowing the presence of ordered binding pockets inside proteins. So this is very important because you have polar and non-polar repel water and those which are waterphilic, they love water. And amino acids, they have always, actually proteins, they have only on the outside of the protein amino acids which are loving water. And in the pocket, there can't be water. It has to be without water in order that enzymatic reactions and catalyzation can occur. So in the inside of the protein pockets, the amino acids, they must repel water. So you require a functional amino acid set which permits to have functional proteins. How do you select that if there were no selection processes available prebiotically? 8. Nature did somehow know that the set of amino acids selected appears to be near ideal and optimal. And they have figured out that amongst millions and over a million different amino acid sets, the one which is used in life is the most adequate to have functional proteins. How did that happen if there was no guidance? 9th, the amino acids were only in homochiral, that is left-handed configuration. Huge problem. There are people which claim that this has been solved. It has not been solved. We know that only left-handed amino acids are used in life, and you need to select them and sort out those which are right-handed. And in life, the ribosome does that selection. And the enzymes which produce amino acids, they only make left-handed amino acids. And if you have a mix of left-handed and right-handed amino acids on a prebiotic earth, how do you select those which are functional? There was no such selection process available. This is another huge problem, and it has not been solved. 10th, they would be pure and without contaminating reactants, somehow avoiding the concomitant synthesis of undesired or irrelevant byproducts. Another huge problem. They cannot have contamination, and of course, they were mixed with many other things which are detrimental to have a functional amino acid, and there was no selection process to sort out those which were clean to those which were unclean. Maybe they were all unclean and there was no process to clean them, to make them clean. So that's another huge problem. 11th, they would be all bifunctional monomers with amino groups and carboxyl groups. Amino acids with unifunctional monomers with only one functional group would have been sorted out somehow. Of course, there was no selection process to sort out only those which have two functional groups, which is absolutely essential to have amino acid chains. If you have incorporating just one amino acid with only one group, then the polymerization stops and you cannot get the length which is required to have functionality. So probably you would never get a sequence with enough length that would become functional. In the smallest proteins, they have maybe about 50 amino acids. So you have to get at least 250 amino acids. But if you have one amino acid which has two functional groups, and you have two amino acids which have just one functional group, and you incorporate those which have just one functional group accidentally in the chain, game over. You cannot keep polymerizing the chain and getting a sequence which would have at least 50 amino acids and eventually become functional. Another huge problem. 12th, they would remain stable and not evolve to give uselessly complex mixtures as faults. So the tendency of a polymer of an amino acid strand or a protein is not to complexify and get longer. It is simply to devolve, to become simpler. Another huge problem. 13, they would be able to bond and polymerize by non-enzymatic means without the ribosome. So polymerization is a process which is performed by the ribosome and which is very complex and precise. And of course, the ribosome was not there on the prebiotic curve to make that polymerization. And there is no known mechanism which does the same without using the ribosome. So another huge block and barrier and problem. 14th, there are 4 different ways to bond amino acids together by the side chains. If bonded to the wrong side chain, no deal. They would somehow bond together at the right place. Well, but there was no selection or mechanism to bind the carboxyl groups to the amino groups. They could have been bonded to the side chains, and I mean then you would have just a mix and a chaotic molecule without function at all. Another huge problem. So 15th, the polypeptide chain would not hydrolyze to its constituent amino acids. So when you have, as I said previously, a polymer or strand, it will hydrolyze or water will break it up, and then it will simply go back to a simpler form, to a shorter polymer strand. 16th, in each trial, the average protein would be 400 amino acids units in length. So I'm saying that because we know that the average size of proteins of bacteria is about 300 amino acids, and of eukaryotic cells, 400 amino acids. How do you get to that size? That's a big number, and you have to chain them all together in the right sequence and in the right way. There was no mechanism to do that. '18th, if a usable sequence were obtained, the action would stop so that it would be preserved and shuffling would restart to obtain all proteins required for life. So let's even suppose that it would be possible to have a strand of 300 or 400 amino acids. What would happen is that the polymerization would have to stop, and then somehow that chain would have to try out if it would fold into a 3D form, which would become somehow functional. We know that proteins, once the polymer strand, when it comes out from the ribosome, it folds into a 3D form, which then becomes functional. And of course, if there would be a prebiotic polymerization process, that process would have to know where to stop and then making the trial and error process to see if that sequence would fold into a 3D form. That would, I mean, how do you get that mechanism? And 20, the synthesized proteins would be able to merge and interlink into assembly lines and metabolic pathways ready to working together in a living system. So this is another level of a huge problem, which will be the last point which I will address today in this stream. So you can see that it is not only a problem to have a functional proteome, a set of proteins which would be required to have life, as well into a meaningful metabolic system. And how do you get that prebiotically without guiding, without someone knowing what that interconnection has to be in order to be functional? So let me put up this paper here and demonstrate to you that there is, on top of the problem to have a first proteome, also the problem to have a first interactome. Okay. All organisms have a genome, some an epigenome, and all life has a proteome, a metabolome, and less known as well, an interactome. I wrote that wrong here, which defines all cellular interactions, amongst it all protein-protein interactions of a cell. 2. Protein-protein interactions are one of the most important components of biological networks. Proteins, in order to perform their functions, often need to be interlinked in an interdependent manner with other proteins to form production line-like associations to produce the various molecules, building blocks, cofactors, and proteins of the cell. Without the right interdependent linkages, there would be no life on Earth. Besides explaining the origin of a minimal protein set on early Earth, the smallest proteome of a free living cell is 1,350 proteins by Pelagibacter ubique. It must also be explained how they got interlinked together. And fourth, the odds to connect all 1,350 proteins in the right functional order, supposing that all outcomes would be equally likely. In other words, every connection would have an equal chance of being chosen. The odds of an event occurring are equal to the ratio of favorable outcomes to unfavorable outcomes. So the odds would be 4.1431 to 3,641 power. That is an unimaginably large number with 3,641 zeros. There are 10 to the 22nd power of stars in the knowable universe. This is the odds on top of the odds to have a functional proteome, which is in the case of Pelagibacter again, with 1,350 proteins, average 300 amino acids, 1 to 10 to the 722,000th of power. It should be evidently clear by the astronomical odds that having a functional interactome of the currently known smallest life form, Pelagibacter, on top of a functional proteome is in the realm of the absolutely impossible. And I have been many times criticized that I say that life from non-life by unguided means is impossible. And if we look to these numbers, then I think it can be said with certainty that it is impossible. I mean, let me show you here. Let me find this here. What is the threshold of what is possible or not possible in regards of here? Let me check here. Okay, let me put this quote here. Just a minute. The late Nobel Prize winning scientist George Walt once wrote, "However improbable we regard this event, evolution, or any of the steps which it involves, given enough time, it will almost certainly happen at least once. Time is in fact the hero of the plot. Given so much time, the impossible becomes impossible, the possible probable, the probable virtually certain. One has only to wait. Time itself performs miracles." Now, this calculation here made by Stephen Meyer, I think is very interesting. Let me put this a little bit bigger. Okay, put this a little bit bigger here. Stephen Meyer, he writes here in his book Signature in the Cell, chapter 10. There have been roughly 10 to the 16th power of seconds since the Big Bang. Due to the properties of gravity, matter, and electromagnetic radiation, physicists have determined that there is a limit to the number of physical transitions that can occur from one state to another within a given unit of time. According to physicists, a physical transition from one state to another cannot take place faster than light can traverse the smallest physically significant unit of distance. That unit of distance is the so-called Planck length of 10 to the 33 centimeters. I don't know how you say that. Therefore, the time it takes light to traverse this smallest distance determines the shortest time in which any physical effect can occur. This unit of time is the Planck time of 10 to the 43rd seconds. Based on that, we can calculate the largest number of opportunities that any physical event could occur in the observable universe since the Big Bang. Physically speaking, an event occurs when an elementary particle does something or interacts with other elementary particles. But since elementary particles can interact with each other only so many times per second, since there are a limited number of elementary particles, and since there has been a limited amount of time since the Big Bang, there are a limited number of opportunities for any given event to occur in the entire history of the universe. This number can be calculated multiplying the three relevant factors together, the number of elementary particles times the number of seconds since the Big Bang times the number of possible interactions per second. This calculation fixes the total number of events that could have occurred in the observable universe since the origin of the universe at 1 to 10 to 39. This provides a measure of the probabilistic resources of the entire observable universe. And Emil Borel gave an estimate of the probabilistic resources of the universe of 10 to the 50th power. So let's put as a threshold this number here, 10 to the 139th power. So if the odds are beyond that, we can reasonably say that it is the realm of the impossible. Okay? It is in the realm of the impossible. So I have no problem to say that abiogenesis, based on the calculations, is in the realm of the absolutely impossible. So I think I am justified to say if we have that threshold, then it is not possible. It is impossible. So let me see here. I think this to end here my presentation. I'll quote here Oparin, which said, "Even the simplest of these substances, proteins, represent extremely complex compounds containing many thousands of atoms of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen arranged in absolutely definite patterns, which are specific for each separate substance." So the student of protein structure, the spontaneous formation of such an atomic arrangement in the protein molecule would seem as improbable as would the accidental origin of the text of Irgil's Aeneid from scattered letter type. I think we can reasonably say that the origin of life, just based on these calculations, is in the realm of the impossible. And if you, which have been listening to what I said, disagree with me, I will put here the link to the in the side chat. You can come in and make your case. So Peter Martin, you have objected me many times in the chat section. If you think that I am wrong in something which I have presented this morning, come in, make your case. Tell me why you think that I am wrong, and we can have a conversation in regards of that. I will wait a few minutes, and if nobody comes in, then I will have to close the stream. So Dimitar said, I have more important things to do, not to lose my time. Well, that's up to you, Dimitar. I think if you have such a strong case for abiogenesis and that evolution explains the origin of life, it is easy to go to speech channel where you have friendly territory and where everybody listens to you with attention and agrees with you. And I mean, we had several interactions in the past, and we had a considerable email exchange recently again. And I don't think that you have been able to defend your position. And I think that the evidence is very strong in our favor. And I think what I demonstrated this morning is very strong evidence that random unguided events are not a plausible explanation for the origin of life. So does someone want to come in to have a conversation, or I will have to close the stream? Argota, do you want to come in, or Peter? The link is in the side chat. I'll wait a couple of minutes. If nobody comes into the room, then I will close the stream. Yes, hello, David.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thanks, and you?
Good, thank you. I don't know if you're even interested in conversation that I could provide, but I figured nobody was jumping in, so I figured I'd at least jump in and say hello.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sure you know I'm not certainly up into the science part of this, all these arguments. I just kind of have a general knowledge of that kind of stuff. I certainly don't have the study that you put into it, or most people in the community do. So, I mean, I can just give you a generalization, you know.
No, I am aware of this. I mean, I know you for several months already, Lori.
Yeah.
I know you are an unbeliever, an atheist. But did you listen to my arguments, which I provided in the stream?
Sure. Yeah. If you'd like, I'll give you my opinion on, as far as mostly the big numbers part of it, on the way I look at it.
Okay.
I guess the way I look at it is life happened, so that's a given. So that's, we know what life consists of. We know you take all the chemicals and put them together, and that is what life is. So we know those two things are a given fact. So I mean, so that's why I kind of like throw the big numbers things out, maybe I can try to explain it a little bit better by using maybe an analogy of let's say you use a golf game. Okay, so let's say I take a golf ball and I hit it and I get a hole in one. Well, the chances of that are, quite slim, right? Okay, every time I hit a golf ball, the chances of it going in the hole are pretty slim. But yet, if I take it and I hit it and I get a hole in one, it actually happened. So we know it happened. So it doesn't matter how many, what the numbers are, whether it's 1 in a million or 1 in a trillion, that doesn't matter. It still happened. So that's kind of the way I look at it.
Okay, but in order to happen, you need an agency, right?
I don't, in the golf situation, yes, but as far as life, no, I don't consider it a necessary thing.
Okay, so let us suppose that you have just random atoms, chemicals, and molecules laying around on a prebiotic Earth. Imagine Mars. Okay.
Yep.
So, what would happen if you had just hundreds and hundreds of different amino acids laying around on a prebiotic Earth, similar to the situation which we see on Mars, where there were just rocks and that's it? Put also water, as let's suppose there was also water available.
What would happen, you're asking?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, given the right circumstances, those chemicals would mix and interact, given the right circumstances. So, I mean, that would be the way I would answer that.
Okay. Did you follow my stream from the beginning, Lori?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you see the list of almost about 20 different things which would have to be just right in order to have an amino acid set which is used in life in order even to start the shuffling to attempt to have a functional, even just one functional protein?
Yeah, I understand that.
So is there something which you object in regards of what I presented in specific? I can put the list here in the chat again. We can start with the number 2 here. I'm showing it here on the screen on the screen. Can you see it?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So first of all, you need nitrogen and carbon in fixed form, necessary elements of amino acids. Okay. This was not readily available. And there are very complex metabolic pathways which fix nitrogen and carbon in order to make ammonia and carbon available to be incorporated into the amino acids. These metabolic pathways were not extant prebiotically. The game would be already here.
And how do we know that? Forgive me, because I'm certainly don't have much knowledge in this kind of things. And how do we know that they weren't available?
Because only you know that our atmosphere has about 20% of dinitrogen, right? It is composed of 20%. No, sorry.
So you're comparing it to now.
Sorry, it is 20%. Yeah, but
right?
Nitrogen it is 20% oxygen and 78% nitrogen, sorry. So even if the atmosphere would have been different, but nitrogen must be available in the form of ammonia in order to be incorporated into amino acids. Okay.
And so we know, I mean, we know for sure that obviously the atmosphere was completely different. We didn't have an atmosphere at the very beginning. Obviously, the Earth is forming, and all you have is a bunch of rocks coming together. So there's no atmosphere there whatsoever.
No, the
And
atmosphere, we don't know what it was composed of. There was an atmosphere, but we don't know the mix of that atmosphere. But what we do know
correct.
is that amino acids and actually also nucleotides require nitrogen in available form of ammonia to be incorporated. And
So
what? Mhm.
okay, so my question, basically what I just said was, okay, you have the beginning formation of the planet, right? Is, basically you have a bunch of rocks coming together and clustering, clinging together and combining, spinning, doing whatever, however that works. And you have no atmosphere there whatsoever at the very beginning. So eventually it slowly moves into a certain type of atmosphere, certain chemicals or certain things in the atmosphere as that progresses along. So you're saying, we didn't have this, we didn't have that. Well, we didn't have anything at the beginning, and then it slowly progresses to having those things. Correct?
You can posit whatever you want, Lori. You can say there was no atmosphere at all. You can say there was a different atmosphere. You can put whatever condition that you think was on the primitive Earth extent. It doesn't matter. The key point here is that in order to have the basic building blocks of life, you need carbohydrates, and you need carbon and nitrogen in usable form of ammonia available. And what provides that today are very complex metabolic processes which transform or fix nitrogen and carbon dioxide. And these processes depend on proteins and enzymes, and these proteins and enzymes were not extant prebiotically, and there is no known alternative mechanism.
Okay, so I still not understanding that part of it. Now, if there was nothing there, no atmosphere whatsoever, and it eventually those chemicals and those things, become available. Eventually, we know they did because they're here now. So at some point, they weren't there, and they're here now. So I'm still not following you how you're saying they weren't available. At some point, they were, or is it you're just saying that God just kind of snapped his finger and put them there, or I'm not following you there.
What I'm saying is that you have two possible explanations for origin of these basic building blocks of life. One explanation is that natural mechanism fixing dinitrogen in the atmosphere and carbon dioxide, that natural mechanisms provided that transformation. And the other explanation is that God created life right from the beginning, fully functional, with the mechanisms able to fix nitrogen and carbon dioxide. And science has absolutely no explanation how that could have occurred by natural means. And that's a big problem. It is not explained. The metabolic first scenario, which is one of the two main proposals of science, has been shown to not be feasible at all. And I mean, what I am applying here is eliminative induction to the best explanation, which is if one scenario is unlikely or not possible, then the other is by default true, even if we don't fully understand how it could have happened. So what I am saying is, if there were no natural plausible mechanisms extant on the prebiotic Earth to fix nitrogen and carbon dioxide, to have it available in usable form, then design is the more plausible and better explanation.
Yeah, I completely understand your argument. But like I said, I look at it completely different. I understand how you look at it, and to me, you're just saying we don't know how. We haven't figured out the actual mechanism, or how these chemicals became available, or how certain proteins, or however. Like I said, I have a limited understanding of all these things, but how these things actually came about. Yeah,
yes, let me read that to you. The implausibility of metabolic cycles on the prebiotic Earth. Okay, almost all proposals of hypothetical metabolic cycles have recognized that each of the steps involved must occur rapidly enough for the cycle to be useful in the time available for its operation. It is always assumed that this condition is met, but in no case have persuasive supporting arguments been presented. Why should one believe that an ensemble of minerals that are capable of catalyzing each of the many steps of the reverse citric cycle was present anywhere on the primitive Earth, or that the cycle mysteriously organized itself topographically on a metal sulfide surface? The lack of a supporting background in chemistry is even more evident in proposals that metabolic cycles can evolve to lifelike complexity. The most serious challenge to proponents of metabolic cycle theories, the problems presented by the lack of specificity of most non-enzymatic catalysts, has in general not been appreciated. If it has been ignored. Theories of the origin of life based on metabolic cycles cannot be justified by the inadequacy of competing theories. They must stand on their own. So this is very clear. And what they are basically claiming is that these metabolic cycles happened on metal surfaces on the prebiotic Earth, basically on rocks. But even if that is not plausible, what is even more unplausible is this, Lori. One of the most simple cycles, metabolic cycles, is the tricarboxylic cycle, or TCA. That is what life uses as the most simple one to fix carbon. And it uses 9 different enzymes or proteins. So you would, even if it would be possible that carbon could be fixed on clay or metal surfaces, there you still have to explain how the transition would happen to the metabolic cycles which use proteins. That's a huge gap which cannot be crossed. It has not been even addressed. It's a big problem.
Yeah, I understand your argument, and like I said, basically my argument is it happened. There's no question it did happen. It's just a matter of how. So,
yeah,
like I said, my argument is we know it happened. So it's just a matter of we have to figure it out. And we just don't know. We haven't got all the answers. So that's just a matter of...
Well, Lori, the problem is not that we don't have all the answers. The matter is that the possible answers have been figured out and have been provided. And as I just quoted you, the natural alternative possible causes are not plausible. It is not that we have just started to attempt to figure it out. The thing is that science in over 70 years has investigated these things, and the conclusion, as Oracle said, is that natural mechanisms are not plausible. They are too unspecific.
See, and there I disagree. Like I said, it did happen. And
The question is how. And I
right,
say,
exactly.
and I say that design is the superior explanation based on the fact that intelligence can make assembly lines. We know that,
I understand how you get there. I completely understand how you get there. But like I said, I view it completely different. I let me say, let me try to use another analogy, which is probably not the greatest. But let's say, okay, you have a cake. Okay, you you bake yourself a cake. You know what? Now you have this cake. We know what all the ingredients are, right? You take those ingredients, you mix them together, you cook it in the oven, and it becomes a cake. So if we know that did happen, you know, you have the cake, you actually have the cake, you know what it's made of. So that cake was baked. It did happen. Now the question is how do you take those ingredients, mix them together, and bake it? That's the question, and we just do not have all those answers. So
so
it's
let me ask you something. So
it's
let
as
me,
simple
let
as that to me.
yeah.
That's
So let me ask you something, Lori. If I give you all the ingredients to make the cake, okay,
Yep.
and I put you the ingredients on the table. If you do not have a recipe to make the cake, can the cake self-assemble by itself?
absolutely not. But there,
There you have it. You
well,
just gave the
but the
answer
thing
to
is,
your own question.
no. Let me explain. Let me explain. Now, it's just a bad analogy. That's all. It's just because
You gave the analogy, and I agree
understand
with
that.
it. It is the
Understand
same
that.
situation prebiotically.
It's
Even if I give you the four basic building blocks of life readily available, that is the phospholipids, the carbohydrates, the amino acids, and the nucleotides. David, Lori, here you have
but
all the ingredients
okay.
to make
I
life.
understand. I understand. Let me explain. Okay. Now, yes, I did come up with that analogy because
It's
for
a good
one reason,
analogy. I like it
no,
because it's
right, no,
adequate.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's but the thing of it is that you can't use that analogy. It's a simple one and it's very easily to understand, but it's a bad analogy because a cake is obviously made by a person, by an intelligence. So you
Yes.
can't. It's so that's what makes it a bad analogy. Let's go back. Okay, give me a minute. Let's go back to now. You give me all the ingredients. Well, when you go back to biotic Earth, there are mechanisms and there are things there that actually do naturally the things that bake a cake, as in wind. You have water, you have movement, you have rotation of the earth. You know, all of those things are doing the mixing, and we know all of those things are natural. Wind, pressure, water, movement. I could, if give me a minute, I could probably come up with a whole ton of other things, and all of those things are natural, and all of those things are doing the mixing. Okay, the wind and the water; those are the things that are your mixer for mixing your cake. So there you go; those are all natural things.
Okay. So let's suppose that you have all these natural things available and you have all the ingredients to make your cake. Make the cake without the receipt.
What do you mean by receipt?
The receipt, the instructions how to make the cake. You don't have it, but you have all the ingredients and you have all the wind, the natural things which you just described. Can you make the cake without having the instructions how to make the cake?
Absolutely. Given okay, let's say I have the cake, and I don't have the receipt,
No,
but I have
no,
all the
no, no. You have just the ingredients.
Right,
You have
right,
just the ingredients on the table, and you have
right.
all the natural resources which you just mentioned, wind and whatever you want to mention. Can you
Right.
get the cake fully ready to be consumed without the instruction manual how actually to bake the cake?
To be completely honest, yes, absolutely. Because okay, let me
Have you
explain it.
have you seen that
Yeah,
happening?
yeah. Well, let me explain. So let's say you have the ingredients, and in order to make the cake, it takes 1,000 different uh, types of mixtures to actually create the cake. Well, if you give me that many chances or that many different opportunities, eventually it will happen. Yes. You know, and you're talking about billions of years, hundreds of millions of years, billions of years it took to create that. If you look at the history of the earth, you know, we only had what single-celled life or for what 3 billion years before anything actually created, you know, anything went beyond that. So that's a lot of time.
Okay, so let us suppose that you have all your ingredients on the table, and you have a billion years. What would happen with these ingredients?
Well, okay, now you're going to go into okay, they would degrade and they
Yeah,
wouldn't be usable.
yeah.
Well, that certainly is, but how do you know that those ingredients, okay, I have a certain amount of ingredients. I have a certain amount. Let's say I have an ounce or whatever. And those ingredients, okay, I have a certain amount of time. I wasn't able to create my cake. All my ingredients degrade, but I also have the opportunity to renew those ingredients and renew those ingredients. Keep renewing, keep renewing, keep renewing. And that's how that happens. Very simple.
And you renew them and they degrade. You renew them and they degrade. You renew them and they degrade.
Right, right. But we're talking about hundreds of millions, billions of years. You know, that's the thing about the way I look at it is you look out at our universe and it's, just about 14 billion years old and it is massive, huge. Very unlikely things happen in our universe all the time, constantly. Stars explode all the time. They are very rare. So they say it only happens every, one star every 100 years in our galaxy. Well, you look out and there's trillions of galaxies. So that happens all the time. So, in other words, you can look out and you can see stars exploding all the time because it's so massive. And it's the same type of situation on the prebiotic Earth. The Earth was massive. You had massive and massive amounts of chemicals, different reactions, different combinations, different pressures. You have so many combinations that eventually improbable things happen all the time because it's such a massive amount. So it's very easy for me to understand it and explain it, but I understand that you just see it completely different. So
Well, not only me, Laurie, but I can cite you here Karen Smith, which is a very well-known abiogenesis researcher. He has published several books, and here this is what he says in the book 7 Clues to the Origin of Life. Vast times and spaces do not make all that much difference to the level of competence that pure chance can simulate. Even to get 14 sixes in a row with one dice following the rules of our game, you should put aside some tens of thousands of years. But for 7 sixes, a few weeks should do, and for 3 sixes, a few minutes. This is all an indication of the steepness of the cliff face that we were thinking about. A 3-step process may be easily attributable to chance, while a similar 30-step process is quite absurd. But in regards of the origin of life, you don't need just 30 steps. You need thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of different steps. Consider
like
that only,
just, I
consider
don't
that consider that the smallest and simplest life form that we know of today is a bacteria which uses 1,350 proteins, and each protein with an average of 300 amino acids. If you shuffle randomly, you have 1 to 10 to the 722,000 of power of possibilities.
right. Like I said, the numbers really don't change my view whatsoever, because like I said, you just have so many opportunities, so much time, and it equates exactly like the universe. You have a massive universe, and improbable things happen constantly because it's just so massive, and you have the same exact situation on the planet Earth when it started. The planet Earth, in our perspective, is massive. It's huge, and you have so many different opportunities that improbable things are going to happen because it's so massive. So it's very easily understandable to me, and very probable to me, because no matter what, no matter how many times you come up with the numbers, it's so massive, and there's so many things happening all at the same time that it's bound to happen, because eventually you get the
Okay,
right
if
ingredients,
you
the right
okay,
combination,
if you
and the right
if you did
situation.
listen, if you did listen to the whole stream, then you should remember what I did read previously. The calculation fixes the total number of events that could have occurred in the observable universe since the origin of the universe at 10 to the 139th power. That is the total number of possibilities where you could have shuffled to have a functional sequence. Okay, but
Right. I
you,
mean,
you
like I said,
if you
those
take
numbers.
if you take
I
the
mean,
14 billion, the 13.3 billion years, that's let's suppose that was the time that we had at disposition, and you take all the interactions which are possible in the entire time span of the universe, then you come to that number which I just said before. You cannot have more interactions in the entire history of the universe than that number of 10 to the 139th power. But you require 10 to the 722,000 of power in order to shuffle and getting a protein set with 1,300 proteins, which would be still have to be assembled into a meaningful sequence in order to have a metabolic pathway. So it's not possible. You can, I mean, what you can do is put just blind faith into that, but it is not rational.
The nail in the coffin there, you throw out all those big numbers, the nail in the coffin there is it did happen. It absolutely did happen. We're 100% sure of that, because I'm looking at myself, I'm looking at you, it happened.
The
So
question
those
is
numbers
how?
are meaningless.
Well, the question is
Exactly.
how.
Exactly.
If the odds are the numbers, the possibilities are too big that it could have happened by natural means, then the obvious and logical inference is that an intelligent creator making life is the more plausible explanation, Laurie.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I completely understand how you get there. I absolutely do. But to me, the nail in the coffin is, as you say, it's implausible. It couldn't have happened. It couldn't have happened. The nail in the coffin is it did. It did.
Couldn't have happened by natural means, Laurie.
Like I said, that's how you get there, and I don't get there.
And you are not being rational. Sorry to be frank.
that's your opinion. You're absolutely entitled to your opinion, and I can say the same to you because I can say, you know what, the nail in the coffin is it did happen. Improbable things happen in our universe every day, all the time, and on my side is it actually did happen, and we know it did. We just don't know how. And you look at the history of science. I mean, there's certain things that we have figured out, certain mechanisms or things that have taken 100 years to figure out. And we sit, if you go back 100 years and you say, oh, what they were thinking back then is, oh, this is impossible. This is so difficult. I don't know how we can never figure this out. And then you fast forward 100 years, we figure it out, and you say, in so many cases, it ends up that it's like, oh my God, that the answer was sitting there, staring us right in the face. How simple it was. It's very easy to when you have a problem that's so difficult like this, to say, oh, it's so hard, we're never going to figure it out. But then, when you don't know something, it is completely unheard of and you can't figure it out. But once you know, and once you start doing that procedure or a certain thing that you're trying to figure out, all of a sudden it's a piece of cake. It's simple. And those things happen all the time.
Okay, Iron Charioteer said that a channel called God Talk that does not talk about God. Well, I will just talk about God now, okay? I want to read this to you. Living cells store very complex genetic and epigenetic information through the genetic code and over 40 epigenetic languages, translation systems, and signaling networks. These information systems prescribe and instruct the making and operation of cells and multicellular organisms. The operation of cells is close to thermodynamic perfection, and its operation occurs analogously to computers. Cells are computers in a literal sense, using Boolean logic. Each cell hosts millions of interconnected molecular machines, production lines, and factories analogous to factories made by man. They are unparalleled gigantic complexity, able to process constantly a stream of data from the outside world through signaling networks. Cells operate robot-like autonomously. They adapt the production of and recycle molecules on demand. The process of self-replication is the epitome of manufacturing advance and sophistications. And two, the origin of blueprints containing the instructional complex information and the fabrication of complex machines and interlinked factories based on these instructions, which produce goods for specific purposes, are both always the result of intelligent setup. Three, therefore, the origin of biological information and self-replicating cell factories is best explained by the action of an intelligent designer or God who created life for his own purposes. So yes, I talk at my channel about God, Iron Charioteer.
I see how you get there in that circumstance too. And the way I would explain that is, human beings were extremely intelligent, but we also need help, right? So where do we get that help? We look to nature to figure things out, or to at least help us design things, right? Obviously, look at the airplane. Okay, how do we figure out how to fly? Well, we study birds. How do birds do it? How do they, how are their wings?
Hey guys.
Yes,
so
hello.
When we're studying birds, good morning. When we're studying birds, we're studying God's design and mimicking what He's already done. And the same is true for lots of technology that man has developed, have been developed by mimicking the things that God has designed. For example, it's likely that the fans in your desktop computer, the next one you buy, or the one after, will have ridges on the edges of their blades, because engineers have discovered that the fins of certain fish that have these ripples on the edge of them make for more efficient movement, movement in a fluid, and it works for air like it does water. And so they're making superior fans based on nature. And so the examples of this are extensive. There are a great many, and they happen all the time. So these are examples of man studying what God has designed and mimicking it. It's not nature didn't make it. I think the idea that Otangelo is trying to help you understand is that for the idea that nature is capable of designing these things is preposterous. It takes intelligence.
I see how you get there, but you're just calling nature God. That's all. That's the only difference. I mean, that's the way I see it.
No, not at all. And one of the reasons we know that that's not so is because, for example, the DNA molecule is a four-dimensional package of information, and information which prescribes biological functions and anatomical features. Prescription is something produced only by intelligence. Information requires forward thinking. Something must be known, and then you have to decide to convey it so that the information becomes useful. It's also algorithmic. It operates with algorithms, and it's linguistic. It's semiotic, for example. And so these things require forward thinking. Now, I don't know where you would get the idea that matter, no matter how you arrange it, no matter how much of it or little you have, could be forward thinking. That is, consider the future and what to do in it or how to accomplish something. That's not something logically that could arise by material processes. It takes a mind to think about the future, plan for activities for the future, prescribe actions to take place in the future. And that's exactly what DNA does. Can you think of a reason to believe that matter can be forward thinking? The chemical interactions of matter can consider or participate in the future.
It's just emergent properties. It's just emergent things.
That's just a blanket term. That doesn't answer anything to say emergent property. Well, of course you think it's an emergent property. That's not an explanation. That's a label. You haven't given us a reason.
But
what is a rational reason for believing that matter can be forward thinking?
That's exactly what you're doing with, the DNA and how information is transferred. It's just an analogy. It's the same thing.
It's not an analogy. It's actual. It is actual algorithmic. It is actual semiotic, and it is actually information. If it wasn't information, then why? If it wasn't information, then why does its content prescribe the design, the development of the stupefying complexity of the biological features of an organism? Why is it a package of a recipe on how to make an organism if it's not information?
Laurie, what is the function of DNA?
Like I said, I'm not all that scientific, so I can't get into all the scientific stuff. Honestly, I couldn't even make the arguments. I mean, like I said, I understand how everybody gets there, how your side. And to me, it's just a matter of that's the way humans are. We have to look to nature, and we have to use analogies in order to understand things, and it's as simple as that to me. It's a very simple thing, but
when you call it an analogy, you're actually admitting that this is what it does. If you say that we just use the word algorithmic to describe the functions, many of the functions that occur in DNA and its molecular machinery that function correspond with the DNA. If you just say that's an analogy, all you're doing is admitting that it operates algorithmically. Now you have to be able to tell us with rationally, you must be able to tell us how it's plausible to believe that nature can produce an algorithm, because an algorithm requires forward thinking. How does chemistry consider or participate in the future? It can't. You see, chemical interactions only occur when one piece of matter are in immediate proximity to another, and they can, boom, do something. They can interact with each other. But a molecule over here has zero relationship to a molecule way over there. They just have nothing to do with each other. So how does these molecules over here prescribe activity that's designed to interact with matter that's over there? Not just any matter, highly specific matter that's physically considerable distance away. Some of the information in the DNA molecule that interact specifically designed to interact with it is way over here on the DNA molecule. And if the DNA molecule, if we made a model of it, let's say the size of a ship's rope, which is like as big around as a soccer ball, maybe, right? Like a 19th century ship rope that holds an anchor or something, we would have a rope that's as big around as a soccer ball. If that were the DNA molecule, it would be miles and miles and miles long. Now, what I'm telling you is a guy holding a piece of that rope down the road here is interactive with a guy holding that same rope 10 miles away. How does that happen chemically? See,
Let me read this from Paul Davies on The Origin of Life. Biological complexity is instructed complexity, or to use modern parlance, it is information-based complexity. Inside each and every one of us lies a message. Decrypted, the message contains instructions on how to make a human being. Inside each and every one of us lies a message. It is inscribed in an ancient code, its beginnings lost in the mists of time. Decrypted, the message contains instructions written in ink or type, but in atoms strung together in an elaborately arranged sequence to form DNA, short for deoxyribonucleic acid. It is the most extraordinary molecule on Earth. Although DNA is a material structure, it is pregnant with meaning. The arrangement of the atoms along the helical strands of your DNA determines how you look and even to a certain extent how you feel and behave. DNA is nothing less than a blueprint, or more accurately, an algorithm or instructional manual for building a living, breathing, thinking human being. We share this magic molecule with almost all other life forms on Earth. From fungi to flies, from bacteria to bears, organisms are sculpted according to their respective DNA instructions. Each individual's DNA differs from others in their species, with the exception of identical twins, and differs even more from that of other species. But the essential structure, the chemical makeup, the double helix architecture is universal. So I love how Paul Davies points it out. Of course, DNA is a molecule which performs chemical interactions, but it is a semantophoretic molecule. That means it stores instructional informations, how to make proteins and how to the interactions in the cell take place. And that depends on the sequence of how these amino acids are ordered in a complex, specified manner. And that's the same as when you write a book. In order to provide meaning to the information in the book, you need to align the letters in a specific complex arrangement that then bears meaning. And that's the same in DNA. And that's what has to be explained.
Yep. I mean, like I said, to me, all these arguments are, it's so complicated. We don't understand it. Therefore God, and I don't see it that way. There's we just have to continue to learn and figure things out, and answers come eventually. And and maybe there are some things that we'll never know, and there's certainly many things that we'll never know in my lifetime. I mean, I'm getting old. I'm not going to be around much longer, so there are a lot of very complicated things out there that I know will never be answered in my lifetime, but that doesn't mean they'll never be answered. It takes time, and technology is progressing extremely fast. So those things help quite a bit to answer certain questions. But it's just, like I said, you're just looking at it as, that's so complicated. How could this, happen? Well, you just don't know. And that's the correct answer, is we don't know.
That's actually, you made an admission when you said that. When you say it's so complicated. And that's one of the points that we're making, is that kind of complexity is not something that arises naturally. Matter moves towards disorder. It doesn't naturally order itself.
There I disagree. You're saying
let me explain.
It doesn't, but it does.
No, nobody knows of any. No,
the nail in the coffin, Neff, is I'm here.
Nobody,
I'm complicated.
Nobody knows.
Happen.
No. Nobody knows. No chemist. No, listen to me, without talking over me, please.
No chemist. But you're talking over me, so I'm.
I was talking.
I will
started out.
When
I started talking about complexity, you didn't like it.
Okay, Laurie, you go first, and then you respond, please.
I promise.
Go ahead,
I don't mean to overtalk. I'm not trying to be rude, but you are overtalking me too. So let's just try to be reasonable.
Laurie, make your point, and then let's Nephilim going ahead, please. Go ahead.
Basically, the nail on the coffin for me is that you say everything is so complicated, we don't know how it happened. But the nail in the coffin is that it did happen. We know it did happen. We know it happened. We know chemicals react in certain ways. We know we're made up of certain chemicals. We know, there's so much we know that it's ridiculous. There's so much evidence that it did happen, and it did happen naturally. Everything is explained naturally. All of those things have been explained naturally, and you see it with your own eyes. Just because we don't understand it, that doesn't mean anything. You just have to figure it out.
Okay, so my response to that is, you're just looking at the world through an a priori materialist assumption. When you say we know it happened, we don't know any such thing. What we know is this: every chemist in the world knows that matter moves towards disorder, not order. There is no scientist in this world who has ever documented observing that matter naturally organizes itself into anything complex. And when response to this, atheists or evolutionists point to things like snowflakes and crystals forming. The problem is that doesn't constitute complexity. It's a simple pattern of a particular material repeated over and over again. That's not complexity. Biological complexity is various types of matter arranged in specific orders so that they are interactive and even interdependent with each other to produce exceedingly complex things that have function. That's nothing like a snowflake or a crystal. So no scientist has ever documented that matter organizes itself naturally. Instead, what every chemist and physicist in the world knows is that matter moves in the opposite direction. It moves towards disorder, dysfunction, and a loss of potential energy. So what you say we know happened, we know no such thing. And no scientist has ever documented such a thing as possible, much less ever observed it. It's counterintuitive to everything we know about chemistry and physics. Matter does not organize itself. So how in the world did the astonishing complexity and interdependence of biological systems arise, since matter doesn't do that? Now, I just want to share with you one thing on the screen. uh, that I'm trying to share, help you understand one thing. This is from from Statistical and Linguistic Features of Non-Coding DNA, published in a mainstream journal. They state the present evidence supporting the idea that DNA sequences in genes containing non-coding regions is correlated, and that the correlation is remarkably long range indeed. Base pairs thousands of base pairs distant are related. We do not find such long-range correlation in the coding regions of the gene. We utilize this fact to build a coding sequence finder algorithm, which uses statistical ideas to locate the coding regions of an unknown sequence. We resolve the equation, etc., etc. What they're saying is that base pairs of information encoded in the DNA in one location are directly related to other base pairs that are vast distances on the molecule away from each other. In other words, neither one of them has a function or is useful to the organism without the other, and yet they're separated by thousands or even millions of base pairs away from each other. How does chemistry cause a necessary interdependence between matter over here and matter way over there, when those bits of matter are not in contact with each other? That's one of the things I'm trying to help you understand. To do this would require intelligence, because matter doesn't think about or consider the future. Molecules don't sit around and think, I think I'll make myself interdependent with those molecules, 50 miles away from me. It just can't happen. Matter doesn't work that way. But in conclusion, the mind-bending complexity of biological systems is by itself one of the proofs that life was created. We hear the evolutionists say, oh yeah, you Christians talk about complexity. Complexity, as if that proves anything. It certainly does. It proves that somebody designed it, because matter doesn't create complexity.
Well, my response to a couple of things, chemical reactions don't require a mind. We know they happen. You see it every day. We know that happens. And you say, oh, it's never been proven. You see it every day. You look in the mirror.
You're looking at the finished product. That's all you're doing. You're not explaining a process that makes it possible.
I can't explain everything to you, though. That's the thing. I can't.
You can't explain anything.
I don't have all the answers.
You have
Science does not. I have none. I can look in the mirror and I can see that every day.
Looking at the finished product.
It did happen. Right. It did happen. That's
you're assuming it happened by looking at the finished product.
Neff,
that's not an explanation of how it could happen.
Interrupting me, bud. You keep interrupting me. I was very patient and tried to let you speak. I let you speak for quite a while. And I know
can you see what I'm saying, though?
That's okay. I understand. I understand what you're saying. And another comparison too is your, when you're talking about disorder and order and entropy and all that, you're comparing two different types of things. You're comparing, the entropy of the universe. We know that things, go into disorder. Well, that's a non-living universe does that. And you're comparing that to a living organism on the planet, which, you're talking about an open system and closed systems and all that. And, I really don't want to get into the huge argument over that, because we know that can just go on and on forever. But that's the difference. You're comparing two different things that you can't. You're comparing a living organism to a non-living organism. So
it's not two different things. The organism in your mind was produced by the universe, but the universe and matter on the planet
a non-living
towards disorder.
A non-living thing and a living thing are two different things, and that's what I'm saying.
All the matter in the universe, including the matter that's on this earth and every bit of matter it's made of, is moving towards disorder right this minute. All of it. The only thing that isn't, biological systems are decaying and organisms are dying. That's entropy too. But you're trying to explain how the organism got so complex, how it came into being by matter causing complexity. But what we observe in matter in this universe and even on the earth is that matter doesn't do that. It moves the other way. So what you're believing is that matter somehow was able to do this magical thing and create this mind-bending complexity. And yet, everything that scientists observe about matter is it does the opposite. It moves towards disorder, neutrality, and dispersal. But here's the organism. All you're doing is looking at the organism but saying, hey, there it is. So it had to happen. Well, that's just an a priori assumption. You're
That's
not,
right.
it's showing, there's no scientifically valid reason for believing that matter on this earth could organize itself into anything complex. No scientist has documented such a thing. No scientist has ever observed such a thing. Instead, all they ever observe is the
Really?
exact opposite.
I don't
That's
know how
right.
you get
Oh,
there.
I challenge you to find me one chemist on this earth who says he has documented and published in a journal that he has observed matter naturally moves itself towards order. Find me one.
Like I said, I'm looking
won't
at the
find
finished
one.
product. I look at the finished product every
You
day
can't
in the
find
mirror.
one. There is
And
no
it's-
chemist that would make that statement. They'd be ousted by the community.
Okay.
They'd lose all credibility as a
The
scientist.
nail in the coffin is that it happened. Just because I can't explain every single minor little detail to you,
Can't explain any.
that doesn't. I can't explain any. Really,
None.
I look
No.
in the mirror. I visibly see it
You're looking at the
every
finished
day,
product.
all the time. I can't. And you sit there and say I can't.
You're
can't
looking at
prove
something
anything.
that nature can't make. That's
It's
the point.
Really,
Yes. that's
nature can't
exactly
make
right.
it.
No, it cannot.
They
Science
Things are
proves
made-
that
things
because
are
matter
made
moves towards disorder.
every day. You were born, right? There's proof right there that nature can do it. Yeah,
No.
So
That's like looking at a car and saying because the car's there, nature can do it. You know better. Than
No,
that.
I can look at that car and say because the car is there, a man can do it.
That's right. And because
Yeah.
the man is there,
It
a
happened.
God can do it. But matter
But
can't
you're
do
just
it.
equating nature with God. That's all. You're just
matter
renaming
can't do it.
nature God. Nature is a thing. thing
The
that
silly
actually
thing is this. What you're in denial of is modern 20th century science. That's all it is. You're denying that matter moves towards
denying
disorder and
science.
does not
Really?
order its magnet. You're believing a fantastical myth that
How
matter is
much
capable
science
of
do
doing
you
this.
agree with? How
No
much science
scientist
do you
knows of
agree
any
with?
such thing.
Jeff,
Just
you
find
don't.
us,
You don't seem
find
to
us a
agree with
chemist.
too much science. You seem to
find us a
disagree with.
chemist.
You seem to disagree with a lot of science. You disagree with all the
That's not
geology on the planet, right? You're young Earth, right? Is that correct?
Evolution is not science, and uniformitarianism denies science.
I didn't say evolution. I was talking about geology.
Right,
Do you
right.
agree?
Uniformitarian.
Are you young Earth?
Of course I am. Uniformitarian geology denies geology.
If you're a young Earth, how much science, or let's say the majority of the scientific community on this planet, how much do you agree with that?
Consensus opinion doesn't prove anything.
Certainly, studies do.
When paradigms are involved.
Studies. A study is a study. An experiment is an experiment. But
They're not observed.
You disagree with all those findings.
Well, no, I don't. Let me give you an example.
You do.
No, let me give you an example. Uniformitarianists look at the geologic column with all its sedimentary strata that have a fine, distinct boundary between each other, flat with each other, and particle size distribution. And the uniformitarianist says those were laid down over vast millions of years. But what's observable, testable, repeatable science performed in the laboratory with sleuths demonstrates is strata form rapidly, right before your eyes, with those very same properties. So real science demonstrates that those strata can't form over vast ages of time. And so your consensus opinion of geologists who say this geologic column is produced by millions of years is in denial of actual, repeatable, demonstrable science.
Now, let's get down to bare bones, okay? What does the scientific community say? The entire
I couldn't give a crap.
Exactly.
What I care about is what's observable.
Let's get down to bare bones.
I care about what's observable.
You're calling me a science denier? Is that what you said a few minutes ago?
Does observation mean anything in science?
Of course it does.
Okay.
But
we don't observe anything you believe.
Answer my question. Did you call me a science denier?
Yes, you're.
Yeah,
We don't
really?
observe anything you say you believe. We don't observe that. What we observe are things that demonstrate that my worldview and Otangela's worldview are correct.
So
We don't observe what you believe. Science doesn't support what you believe. What you believe is mythology. It's not science. It's not scientific.
really.
If it were scientific, we should be able to observe some of this. Instead, what we observe is something completely contradictory to it.
So let's get down to bare bones. Okay, you claim that I'm a science denier, but I agree with the scientific discoveries and things that the scientific community, by and large. Okay, I agree with that.
Lori,
And
Lori, the scientific community has no explanation whatsoever.
Sorry, Angela, you're fading in and out. I couldn't hear you. Could you say that again? I couldn't understand you.
The scientific community has no answer whatsoever in regards of how life could have come from non-life by natural means. So that gives credence to our views that an intelligence was required.
I don't disagree that we don't have that answer. I fully, agree with you there. But that's
there
just
are good reasons. Reasons, Lori, why that is so. Science is trying for over 70 years, maybe 100 years, to solve the mystery of life's origin. So it's not that science hasn't tried. It's that science has tried, and the answers have not been those which science expected them to be. Rather than closing the gap has been becoming greater and greater, to a point where science has to just say it is beyond science to explain how it could have happened by natural means.
Right. Okay, let me try this approach. Let me grant you that. Okay, I'm gonna absolutely grant you that. Okay, that is, let's say we'll put that a feather in your cap. That's because we don't have the answer to abiogenesis. We'll call that evidence for your side, like you said. Okay, I'll grant you that. Let's look at all the other things. I mean, when you look at young Earth creationism, all the other evidence, when you're talking about the entire scientific community, when you're talking about all the geological experiments and things that we've discovered in studies, completely dispute your claim of a young Earth. So you have.
So let's suppose that. So okay, Lori. So let's suppose even that the Earth is old. That doesn't mean that God is not required.
Okay, I'll grant you that. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, let's continue. I'll grant you that. Okay, let's say that. Yeah. Okay, now the Earth is old. Now now you look out at the universe. Okay, we have, the universe is 13 billion years old. What about that?
Okay,
I mean,
so
would you say?
does that mean that God? Does that mean, Lori, that God does not exist? Even let's grant that claim that the universe is 13.7 billion years old. Okay, that means that the universe had a beginning, requires a cause. You have to explain the physical laws, how they came to be. You have to explain the fine-tuning, because without fine-tuning, you do not have stars. Without stars, you do not have the chemical building blocks for life. So these are all questions which you cannot explain by using a materialistic, naturalistic framework.
All right. So my comparison, where I'm trying to get at, is the young Earth's situation. All of the things, all of the evidence.
As I said, Lori, I even gave you that. Let's suppose that young Earth creationism is wrong. So how do you go from that to the no God hypothesis?
When you're talking about a God, okay, we both know you can't prove there is a God, and I cannot prove there isn't a God. So that's, I mean,
I can provide overwhelming inference that God exists.
You think you can.
I know.
Absolutely, and I don't disagree, and I know that you believe you can.
Right,
but I just
we have done so. We have done so in this stream this morning, Lori, and you are just in denial.
That would be your opinion.
Yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's my opinion. Do with it whatever you like.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's been
I
interesting.
can provide an
I try to,
overwhelming inference that God
I'm
exists.
just trying to give you my views, my understandings,
If we can,
I can
and my
can I resume
Bible.
can I resume your views, Lori? I've
But
understood that you say, oh, science doesn't yet have an explanation how it could have happened, but it must have happened naturally. We just don't know how yet. That is a classical materialism of the gaps. You are a master for it.
well, the bottom line is that I have a lot of evidence that it does happen naturally.
We all
Mountains.
have.
you don't
The
have a
question is
shred of evidence.
how.
You don't have a shred
We
of
are all
evidence.
here.
That's exactly right. The question
We
is
are
how.
all here,
So
Laurie.
I can't.
That point is
But
moot.
you,
We all
you,
know that we are here. The question is how it happened. You
Yeah.
cannot deduce automatically that it was by natural
that's
means without a creator.
both of you guys are you're just cherry picking. You're picking out every little thing that we do not have the answers for, and you say, therefore, God.
We do have the answers.
No,
That's God of the gap.
no,
I'll
no,
say
no,
straight up, we do have
That
the answers.
is.
I'll say we do have the answers because if we examine, chemistry, if we examine the complexity of and the properties, the information, algorithmic, linguistic properties of biological information, if we examine the human history, which verifies the Tower of Babel affair is real human history, therefore the Bible's explanation of what occurred then and the Noahic flood, those are also true history. We can demonstrate that the Bible is a product of supernatural inspiration because it possesses foreknowledge, scientific foreknowledge, and also possesses fulfilled prophecies, which would require knowledge of human history beforehand of things so unfathomably unlikely to occur that to get it right every time defies Occam's razor in the biggest possible way. So I can point to that. I can there's a handful of arguments that I can use, and each one of them gives us an inference of the supernatural causation. I can provide when you package these arguments together, what you have is an overwhelming inference that this world was created by a supernatural intellect. That's something you won't accept, but if the argument from science, from history, from the prophetic properties of Scripture, from human history, when you package these things together, you get an overwhelming image that God is necessary and is in fact the cause. This is something that people like yourself will never accept, but it's simply the truth. It truly is true. We actually do have an overwhelming inference for the
No doubt
existence
that
of
you're
God.
extremely passionate of that. I have no doubt about that. And I have no doubt that you believe that, but I don't. And that's the bottom line. I don't see it the way you see it. There's no way that I can prove otherwise. And you certainly can't prove otherwise to me. I mean, that's just the way it is.
When you say you don't see it the way I see it, what I hear is I don't see science the way it's demonstrable. I don't see human history as what we actually have verified, what's been verified. I don't see the evidence that the Bible is supernaturally inspired, despite the fact that it tells the future over and over and gets it right, pinpoint right.
You don't see it because you don't want to see it.
I don't
because
see that.
You don't want to view science that way because
To me, you're like somebody with their hands over their eyes and their thumbs in their ears saying,
Your
"No,
Bible.
no, it can't be true. No."
you don't want to see it that way because it refutes your religious beliefs, and
There's
I
nothing to
certainly
make me think
understand
that
that.
way.
But you cherry pick everything.
No,
We
there's
don't
nothing.
have an answer to this. We don't have an answer to that. And you take
We do have
evidence
answers.
and you twist it around
That's the
to
thing.
make
We
it
do
look
have
like
answers.
the flood happened, or
No.
when science
We
has
have the answers.
studied it and studied those things and have found that the Bible is just not true. The flood did not happen.
Of course it did.
Exodus into the Sinai Desert did not happen. We've looked for evidence for those
Oh
things.
yes, there's
We've
evidence for that.
tried. We've looked for Noah's Ark. We've tried to answer all of those questions in the Bible. Science has struggled and struggled to try to give you guys answers and to try to prove it scientifically, and it has proven otherwise. It has proven the exact opposite, and you don't want to accept that, and I understand, because it goes against your religious beliefs. I understand that, but to me, to just put your blinders on and disagree with the entire scientific community because you wish to believe that the earth is young and that the flood happened because the Bible says so, I think is ludicrous. I think that you're just, that's just blind faith. You just want to accept something, and you're not gonna see the truth.
If what you say is true, then how did the Earth become covered with 1,800 meters of sedimentary strata, littered with rapidly buried creatures that are now fossils? If the world has, and this is common across all the continents, if the world wasn't flooded, huh?
It was
You say there's no evidence of
magic.
Exodus.
It was magic.
If there was no Exodus, then why is it that we have the Papyrus Leiden, also called the Admonitions of Impure or the Impure Papyrus, which is an Egyptian document dating to about 2510 BC, which literally describes the 10 plagues that God put upon Egypt because of the Pharaoh's refusal to release the Hebrews from slavery, and exactly like the Bible describes them, the very same 10 plagues. Did that happen or not? Did the Egyptians happen to tell the same story about these 10 plagues that the Hebrews did, and neither one of them are right? It just happens that they both invented the same story. How'd that happen? If there was no Exodus, how come the Egyptians and the Assyrians wrote in ancient times that the Hebrews were enslaved in Egypt? The Assyrians called them the Hibiri, and the Egyptians called them the Apiru or Hibiru people. In fact, we have an inscription in Egypt issued by a pharaoh who says, "Issue grain to the Apiru, who are the quarrymen for the pharaoh." Quarrymen. These are the guys cutting stone. They're the slaves. Okay. He says, in order to issue grain to them, they're starving, feed them. And he calls them the Apiru. The Apiru is the Egyptian version of the word Hibiru or Hebrew. So how is it that the Hebrews were never enslaved in Egypt? They had to have come out of there because the Jews are not there today. They're in Israel, right? In fact, around the world, really, but Israel. They had to have come out of there. They had to have been in Exodus if they were enslaved there. They're still not there today, right? So there had to have been an Exodus from there. See, these are things that you don't know anything about, but you're going to summarily claim that there wasn't an Exodus, despite the fact that Hebrew pottery has been found in Egypt, and houses with a floor plan like the Hebrews made, not like the Egyptians, but like the Hebrews made, have been found in ancient Egypt. But there was no Exodus. The Hebrews were never enslaved by the Egyptians, right? See, I think there's an awful lot of stuff you don't know about, but you hold so vehemently to this belief system that God can't exist that you declare these things not true, despite a mountain of evidence.
I don't declare them not true. I think that all the scientific studies that have been conducted declare them not true. I think the scientific community has studied a lot of things that we're talking about today, and they just have not been able to prove it. And that's what I go by.
And do you know why, Lori, science didn't come to satisfactory explanations? It's not because they have not tried. It's because natural explanations are inadequate to explain the feat in question.
Certain things, right?
No, not certain things.
You're talking.
All which is related to the origin of life.
Right?
No,
That
no,
was
no.
a
I am saying that basically anything in regards of the origin of life has not been explained. And with that, I am saying the origin of the basic building blocks of life, the origin of the information systems of life, the origin of the genetic code, the origin of proteins, the origin of the interconnection which is required between the information bearing systems and the products which it produces. The origin of the information transmission systems has not been explained. The metabolome has not been explained. Basically, anything has been explained so far. What science has done in 70 years is to expose the enormity of the problem.
That's correct.
I mean, there again, we go back to, you know, you just want to have an explanation for everything, and there's a lot of things we don't understand, and I don't disagree
So
with that.
Laurie, at what point would you say, I think this is evidence that a creator was involved in the process to make life?
At the point where there was actual evidence of a creator. Okay, this is
So
all.
you are
We're all
requiring.
just talking
You are.
speculation. That's
So
it.
you are requiring that basically God shows up. Is that the case?
That certainly would do it. I mean,
No,
am I saying that
so
that's
what
it
else would do it? So what else would do it if not that?
I mean, you know, that's just. It's just a tough question. Okay, I could probably come up with a million different things on how, you know, God could convince me. There's lots of things,
So
but that
what would convince you? What would convince you?
God
Because I
showing
mean,
up. God
amongst
showing
us,
up.
I mean, showing up to you know that this is an
Like I said,
unreasonable requirement. That's
like,
you know.
like I said,
Tangelo, you and I both know that if Jesus Christ popped into his living room at 2 a.m., juggling the solar system in his hands, saying, "Hey, what's up, buddy? Look what I'm doing. There goes Jupiter. Oh, Neptune. Woo." He would wake up in the morning thinking he had a bad dream or ate the wrong thing before he went to bed.
you're absolutely right.
Of course he would.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
Laurie, let's suppose that you would be
All right.
a blind man begging
How
on a
about
corner. No, let
how
me ask
about
you this. I think
okay?
Saul brought up that was a great question which Saul Cardona made in his debate with Matt Dillahunty. He asked him, Matt, let's suppose that you would be a beggar on a street corner and blind, and Jesus would show up in front of you and would heal your blindness. Immediately you would see again and then say, I am Jesus, I am God. Would you believe that God exists? And Matt Dillahunty said, no, I would not believe it.
Let's make this real simple, okay? Obviously, the God question is extremely complicated, and you know everybody has the disagreements. What would make it very simple for me is that you know we talk about the properties of God, how He's all powerful, omniscient, all those different things. He's capable of doing anything and everything. Right?
No, he's able to do what is possible. He cannot make a square circle. He cannot
logically
try and
possible.
say that
But I'm
yes.
not. No, I'm not asking for impossible things. But he's extremely powerful. We don't deny that, right? He's done some
Yes, of
amazing
course.
things. He created the universe. So if he can create the universe, what I'm talking about should be extremely simple for him. If he can, you know, create life. Look at how complicated you claim life is, right? Very
We don't claim
complicated,
it, certainly, yeah.
but he is right. Okay, so we're in agreement there, right? And he created this, so that's pretty difficult to do, right? So I'm not asking for anything complicated. Why can't the God that you believe in just convince everybody?
He does
Everybody
convince
on
people.
the intern. No. What I'm saying is why
Laurie,
can't he convince everybody?
Laurie,
So
I explain you why. Laurie, I explain you why. Because God has given us free will.
Free will.
That's always the go-to, you know. But the question is, you asked me, what would it take for me to believe? And I'm trying to explain that to you, right? I'm not talking about any of the other things. I'm talking about
This is another irrational demand, Lori. Do you know why? Because you're basically demanding that God removes your free will and programs you in order that you believe.
It has nothing to do with free will whatsoever. He could convince the entire planet. A very simple act.
He already has.
A very simple miracle.
He already has.
I understand. Let me explain. He could do a very simple act, right? Perform a miracle, a massive miracle that would convince the entire planet, right? God is fully capable of doing that. If he's capable of creating complex life, he's capable of creating the entire universe. He certainly is easily capable of creating a miracle that would span the entire planet. Let's say he turned around and snapped his fingers and he performed the miracle of every single person that is missing a limb on the entire planet, all their limbs grew back. Okay, that's not really a big deal for God if he can create the universe. If he did that, that would convince the entire
why should he do? Why should he?
Wait. Let me finish.
Mm-hmm.
If he did that, would that not convince the entire planet? Would you agree that would convince the entire planet?
God's already done something as miraculous as that. He created the world and biological life in it.
You didn't
so that we are without excuse, as the scripture says.
Let's answer the question. You asked me the question. I gave you my answer.
So now, that is your threshold to believe. Why should or would God do that, Lori?
That's not the question here. The question is,
he could do it,
what would it take? What would it take? And I answered a miracle like that. I can come up with a million different things, right?
Okay, so I will straight away answer to you, Lori. God will not do that. Do you know why?
Why?
Because that is not his purpose. He wants that we come to him by love, and he has given us enough evidence so that those which seek him will find him, and he has given enough darkness in order for those that want to live autonomously to him will not find him.
All right, let's go back to the bare bones, okay? Let's go back to, I answered your question, you answer my question. So let's not talk about why God would do it or he wouldn't do anything. Let's talk about, you asked me, what would it take to convince me? I told you what would convince me is if God convinced the entire planet. God is all powerful. He creates universes. He's fully capable of doing that. So that's my answer to that question. If he created, if he did a miracle and he had all the limbs on every person that is missing a limb grow back, that would convince the entire planet. Now, I'm asking you, don't you think that would convince the entire planet?
Maybe not. I mean, Matt Dillahunty would not be convinced, as he has confessed in his debate.
Let's be honest. Come on. Let's be honest. If
he has,
person on the planet,
Lord, let me finish that. Lori, look the debate Matt Dillahunty with let me finish this. Watch the debate of Licona with Matt Dillahunty. He asked him, let's suppose that you would see a man which had his head chopped off, and then in front of him, God would make a miracle and would put the head again on its body, and he would go walking and be alive again. Would that convince you that God made a miracle? Do you know what Matt Dillahunty answered? No, it would not convince me.
I mean, that's Matt Dillahunty. I mean, but
so it would not. Your example would not convince the whole world. And Matt Dillahunty just gave an example.
Yeah, I disagree. I mean, there's certainly miracles and there's certainly things that God is fully capable of doing that would convince the entire planet, and that's what I'm saying. That would easily.
He did it. God came in Christ, made miracles which in front of the Pharisees. He rose deaf, like Lazarus. He rose from the death. He resurrected. He made many miracles. He healed the blind. He multiplied fish and bread. He made so many miracles which are recorded. He gave us even the linen where he was put in the shroud of Turin with his image, which nobody knows how that was made. We have the prophecies. We have 356 prophecies in the Old Testament which foresaw the coming of Christ in a very precise manner. So God has given us the entire universe, which is a testimony of his creative power. And you are without excuse, Lori.
That's right. And
let's get back to
Tangelo,
the good thing.
what it hinges on for him is that unless it can't have happened in the past, that's not good enough. He has to be able to observe these miracles himself.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we won't believe them.
Yeah.
Let's get back to the good things, like all the things that you just mentioned, Tangelo. You believe all those things, and that's fantastic. I your religion provides you with a lot of good things. It provides you with a lot of comfort, a lot of, a surety or different things like that. And I think that's fantastic. And so I understand that you believe those things, but the issue to me is that it doesn't convince everybody. So there lies the problem is that you can't.
Lori, the thing is, even if God would reveal himself to the entire world, that doesn't mean that would mean that everybody would know that he exists, like even the devil knows that God exists, but it doesn't mean that everybody would become a believer and a follower of Christ and a child of God and would accept his offer of forgiveness. And
I agree. I agree with you.
Very good point.
There's probably a certain percentage of people on the entire planet that would still deny and still disagree, and those people would be completely irrational. But
I mean, if you ask, let's suppose there are 20 YouTube channels of atheists, of hosts of atheists. If you ask all the 20 of them, God will prove himself to you. Would you convert yourself to him? Would you start to believe and follow Christ and receive him as Lord and Savior of? And I am sure that probably all 20 would say no, because God is a moral monster.
Well, see, that's the thing. It's when you're talking about the God of the Bible and what we know and what is written in the Bible, you can understand why atheists say that, because there are some serious issues in the Bible.
Thank you for confirming what I just said.
Right. I don't disagree with that. There's lots of people that, when you're talking about things in the Bible, it's
there are things that happen in the Bible.
And Lori, do you know what the problem is? Let me just say that, then you can continue. Do you know what the problem is with that, Lori? The problem is that atheists, they require a moral foundation in order to know what is good and wrong, and in order to be even able to criticize the God of the Bible. But their worldview doesn't give them that moral foundation, because if materialism is true, then there are no ought to be's. There cannot be moral duties upon which you can say something is wrong or right, because the universe doesn't care about what you do or do not do, or if you do something right or wrong. Okay, I'm going to lunch, but you guys can continue, all right?
That's a great point. It's exactly true.
Thank you, Tangelo.
So the point I was going to make is that I lost my mental space there.
Let's go back to the example that I was talking about.
So I would say atheists constantly want to claim that the God of the Bible is a moral monster, but the truth is they can't demonstrate that. There's nothing that God has done that's recorded in the Bible that gives us a reason to believe God is a moral monster. God was justified in doing everything that he has done, including having the Canaanites wiped out in the land in which they lived, because it was just to do so, because of the nature of those people and what they were doing. So this was God's judgment. But atheists want to make God out to be a moral monster. They simply can't do that. There's nothing in the Bible that indicates God has less than stellar moral values.
Let's go back to the example of what we were talking about on, if God performed this massive miracle and grew back all the limbs on the entire planet. Okay, so let's say that obviously that's going to convince an awful lot of people. Would we agree on that? I mean,
that he exists, but as Otangelo already pointed out, that wouldn't necessarily mean that those people would become followers of him just because they knew he existed.
Right. We would agree on that for sure, but for sure that it would. I mean, that would just change the world. I mean, you're talking how many Christians are there versus the entire planet? You probably know those numbers better than I do, right?
How many what?
How many Christians are there compared
about
to
2.1 billion people that identify as Christian?
And how many are on the planet? 8 billion?
Close to 8 billion, yeah.
Yeah. So say a quarter, 25%, right? Is that right?
Something
roughly?
like that.
Yeah. So if you're talking 25% of the planet, let's say, are Christians, let's make the numbers easy like that. And then God turned around and did, that type of a miracle that we talked about, that number would probably change to, let's say, 80% at least, right?
I don't think that high. I think it would go up by 1 billion or more. Yeah, at least.
I mean, in my opinion, if he turned around and
a lot of people would say they'd say he's an alien or something. They wouldn't believe that he's actually God. That people don't want to bow to him morally. That's the problem. It's not about whether or not he actually exists. It's about his moral standards and what's expected of you to believe in your heart. And people don't like that message, and so they reject him.
Right. Well, we were talking about basically the question is whether he exists or not, and I think that would be, a very convincing thing. I think it would turn the entire planet into 80% believers and followers of Christ versus.
Well, let me give you an example of how we can know that the God of the Bible is true. I'll give you just one example. In the Old Testament, we read in, I forgot what book it is, Zechariah, I think. I can find out in just a second here. Let's see. No, it's Zechariah 11. Okay. So Zechariah 11 says, and it was broken in that day, and so the poor of the flock that waited upon me knew that it was the word of the Lord. And I said unto them, if ye think good, give me my price, and if not, forbear. So they weighed for my price 30 pieces of silver. And the Lord said unto me, cast it unto the potter, a goodly price that I was prized of them. And they took the 30 pieces of silver and cast them to the potter in the house of the Lord. Okay, so they threw this 30 pieces of silver on the floor in the temple, in the house of the Lord, to buy a potter's field. A potter's field is a place that Jews would use to bury people who died in Israel who were not Israelites, because the Jews wouldn't allow people who were not Israelites to be buried in the same graveyards with them. They made separate allocations for them. You're not a Jew, you get buried over there. Only Jews are buried over here. That's the way they work. So to buy a potter's field is a place where they would bury travelers who came through Israel but died, but weren't Jews. They would bury them somewhere away from the Jews. And so now in Matthew 26 and 27, we find this prophecy of Jesus's 30 pieces of silver paid for him, thrown on the floor of the temple, and being used to buy a potter's field actually came true. In Matthew, we find that Judas Iscariot narked out where to find Jesus so that the Romans could go arrest him because he knew where he was. He took 30 pieces of silver for this information. Later, he became so guilt-ridden that he went back to the temple and said, "This, I can't take this." And he threw it on the floor in the temple. They said, "We can't use that. We can't put it in the coffers. It's blood money." So they collected the money off the floor and used it to buy a potter's field. So, and then the scripture even states this. It states, Matthew 27:9, "Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremy the prophet, saying, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him that was valued, whom they are the children of Israel did value, and they gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord appointed me." See, so that prophecy actually came true. Zechariah was written, 150, 250 years, 100 years, at least, I think, before Jesus Christ was even born. And the Word of God says that God told the Hebrews through the prophet Jeremy that they're going to weigh, they're going to price my life at 30 pieces of silver. It's going to be thrown to the floor of the temple and used to buy a potter's field. That actually happened 100, 150 years later in Matthew 27. How do you explain that? There's only one thing that somebody can say. The guys that read the Old Testament fabricated that it took place relating to Judas Iscariot. They faked it, and they wrote that these things happened to fulfill the Old Testament prophecy. Now, if you're going to do that, you got major problems. You have to come up with a rational reason why these men would conspire to tell a story that would ultimately get them cast out of their own society, hated amongst the Jews, and hunted by the world's most organized and largest army. That you would be outcasts. You'd be on the FBI's most wanted list, which is exactly what happened to them. The apostles were on the FBI's most wanted list. It was ordered by the Jews, and so the Romans, because they were causing problems for Israel, and in Rome just wanted peace. They wanted the Jews to just be good little sublings to them, pay their taxes, and no troubles, no problems, no social disorder. We don't want to have our soldiers running around arresting people left and right, chaos and wars. You guys just be good little Jews and shut up and pay your taxes, and we won't come after you with soldiers. That's what the Romans wanted. So they hunted these men down because they were disruptors of social peace in Israel with this story of Jesus of Nazareth. So why would these guys fabricate a story? Can you imagine that? They're sitting around having lentils and wine and bread, and they're saying, you know what we ought to do, guys? We ought to fake up a story, a bunch of them, in fact, fulfill a bunch of Old Testament prophecies, make them come true about Jesus, who was a real person. Historians all agree Jesus really did preach a ministry and was actually crucified by the Romans. That's historical fact. It's considered historical fact by all historians, except for maybe 5 or 10 fringe nutters who are outside academia. Okay, every reasonable academic historian in the world agrees Jesus was a real man who preached a ministry and was actually crucified by the Romans. Okay, it's not argued. To argue against that would be ridiculous because the evidence is so much. There's so much of it. So here's this real man, Jesus, and these guys are sitting around the table thinking, let's fake up some stories about Jesus and fulfill a bunch of prophecies, make him into God who came to earth to pay the penalty for our sins, and that he fulfilled a bunch of these prophecies. And one of them says, hey, you know, that's interesting, but what are we going to get out of it? And the other guy says, well, I mean, we're going to be hated by the Jews. We're going to have to go incognito because nobody here is going to like us. Go to the store to buy some bread and somebody's going to say, hey, that's one of those Jesus guys, constable. Oh, it's going to be great fun. And on top of that, we're going to have the Roman army hunting us down on horseback. Be a lot of fun, guys. Sound like a good deal? I'm in. Boy, count me in. No, people don't do that. They don't ruin their lives, lose their shirts on their back, give up their homes, their families, and go incognito and run from the law, to be outcasts, hide and live in caves and stuff, for a lie. Nobody does that. Who does that? I'm going to destroy my life, lose my home and money and everything, and become a social outcast. I'll have to cut my hair and change my face, maybe shave my beard so people don't recognize me, and live in seclusion. And because I'm going to write a fake story that's not going to get me a nickel. I'm not going to get anything out of this. I just think I'll destroy my life. But making up a bunch of fake stuff sounds like a plan. Nobody does this. They don't do this. So since that's irrational, how did these prophecies become fulfilled if these guys didn't fake up a story to fulfill the Old Testament prophecy? How is it that
Very passionate you are with your Bible, aren't you?
Can you explain why it's logical to believe how it's possible for these things foretold a century or two more later come true, detail for detail, come true like that? What's
Lori,
the odds that can
it's not
just
just
happen?
about irrational passion. It's about rational inference based on the evidence. And the Bible provides tons of evidence that what is in there is true. We have archaeological evidence. We have extra biblical evidence of Christ's historical existence. We have all these prophecies. Which
I don't disagree. There's lots of things in the Bible that are true. Forgive me, I couldn't even begin to talk about the Bible with you guys because I don't know the Bible at all, really. I mean, just based on all the stuff that
you have never read the Bible, the New Testament. You have never read the New Testament, Lori?
No.
Why don't you?
I mean, well, a little. I've never read the whole thing. Absolutely not. I mean,
why do you not start? I mean, an intelligent person, in order to know if something is possibly true or not, actually investigates. Why don't you start with the Gospel of John, read 2-3 chapters, which doesn't take you more than 10-15 minutes per day, and investigate by yourself?
I have no desire.
Okay, so it boils down to what I said basically at the beginning. The problem of atheism is not that there is no evidence which points to God. It is the problem that people, they do not want God in their life and prefer to live autonomously to Him. And that's why God gave us free will. So people can decide by themselves if they want to follow God and live with Him and be blessed by Him and receive the gifts which He has prepared to those that believe in Him, or if you want to live just autonomously your own life without Him. That's your right, and that's why we have free will. But that's the real reason. It's will. It's not lack of evidence.
Like I said, I'm not. I'm not saying there isn't any evidence. You have the Bible, but it's the
no. We don't have just the Bible, Lori. We have the natural world, which screams that it requires a creator. In special today, where we have in special molecular biology and biochemistry, which is so clearly demonstrating that there has to be a creator of all these super advanced and complex things.
Yep, you are absolutely convinced of that, and I understand. I absolutely understand. You know what I would like to see, though, Antangelo, is I commend you for, you constantly go into Speed's channels and discuss things. What I'd love to see, I've been involved in this community for quite a while now, and I've seen it evolved in probably the past 4 or 5 months. It's kind of gone downhill. Would you agree? I mean, people aren't getting along as well. They're not having the good conversations, right?
Well, there have been a few people which have really helped for Speedstream to become bad, to be nonsensical. And I can name them. One is Leophilius. He's a bad contributor. Another has been John Peterson, which has no understanding of science whatsoever, but he behaves as he is the most educated guy. He confesses that he doesn't have education in science, but he behaves as if he has. Then there is Danny, which just has always talking points which lead nowhere, which are irrelevant, you know. And there are the other bootlickers of Speed, and Speed has just a very bad understanding of science, generally very superficial. And whenever he sees a stream like Dr. Tour, he avoids to criticize it or even to go there to see what they have to say, because he knows he cannot refute it. That's his bias. He's entitled to be biased. He demonstrates it. But I am going always there because, first of all, there is an audience, which we do not know how they will absorb and swallow the information which I am providing there. And there are always talking points which stimulate me to investigate further. And that's when my education comes in. It's not what they say, but there are talking points which motivate me to investigate. And that's good for me.
Yeah. No, I mean, basically my point is that I'm talking about all the streams. I mean, you kind of, I just mentioned it and you jumped right on and just kind of was focusing on Speed's channel. And but I was just kind of referring to the whole entire community. I thought, what I've seen evolve over the past 5 or 6 months or whatever is, when I first really started getting involved and jumping on streams a little bit and, really involved in the chats and things like that, there was a lot of conversations on a lot of different channels, and you kind of don't really see that as much. I see a lot of the channels, there's only like for instance, you would be the only Christian that goes on to Speed's channel. Nobody else comes on because it just turns into some real heated arguments, I guess. So that's probably
the main reason. It's not only that, Lori. I mean, to be honest, Speed, superficially, he seems to be a nice guy, but I mean, every time that I comes in, he puts the Benny Hill still now, and I mean, this is kind of behavior attempting to ridicule me. And when I pointed it out at the beginning, he said, no, it's just to have fun or so, but it's deeper than that, And I mean, there have been very hostile people there, which are always directing to attack me personally, like in special John Peterson.
Right, and that was kind of like the point that I'm saying, and you can also say the same thing with the Christian channels too. You talk about Praise's channel, you talk about John Maddox's channel. I see those channels, and lots of others that, like I said, you don't see Christians and atheists coming together as much and having really good conversations. I see that that has diminished dramatically in the past.
I think that John Maddox has always had his style. He always likes to explicitly expose the irrationality of atheists. It's his way to do it, and it has been ever since like that. It is his style, like it or not. It is not mine. I think my approach is different. I prefer to have conversations like this today, where we address the topics, the issues. I prefer that, but each one of us has an individual style to approach these conversations. That's how it is.
Yeah, that's kind of my point. Is that I agree with you that everybody has their own styles, and you're certainly not trying to say how people should run their channel. My point was that I seen that has diminished. I like to see conversations like what we're having more, and you used to see that quite a bit, and my point is that has diminished on all the channels. It just doesn't happen. There seems to be a lot more hostility now. People aren't getting along as well, and it's kind of a shame, because I really enjoy listening to and being a part of conversations like this, like you said, So that was kind of my point.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it is something before a year ago or so. Um, I was just interacting on Facebook basically, and then this whole thing with YouTube and StreamYard and so came up, and I think it has opened up a great opportunity and a new way of communication, which is, I think, very productive and very fruitful. I
Yeah.
think it's great.
Yep. Yep. The internet is a fantastic thing. That's the big thing is this, all the information is at your fingertips, which is, a fantastic thing,
Yes, I agree
But
with you.
I
That's
definitely,
what
I
has,
wish we could have better conversation. I wish the community would be, come together a little better and be, have better conversations. There still are some out there, and there's still many out there, but it seems our little niche, or at least the little niche that I'm involved in, it has gone downhill. Less tolerance. People aren't getting along as much, so it's kind of a shame.
yeah, I think we as Christians should have really a higher moral standard in regards of our interactions with other people, because it's the direction that our Lord gave us to love our next as ourselves. So that should be our guideline. Not everybody follows it, but it's our guideline. And I mean, with atheists, they have no guidelines. I mean, they say, it's just well being. But what we see is that, in special, we as Christians, and you see it at Speed's channel when I go there, or to other places where of ATS channel, how we are disrespected and how they belittle us and ridicule us, and do not only ridicule our arguments but our also us as persons. That,
Yeah.
but I mean, that is what the Bible um, said that would happen. We would not be loved by the world. We would be persecuted and even
Right.
killed by the world.
Right.
So that's not unexpected. That's not by surprise. That's what we should expect. But I mean, to me, what is relevant is that I please my Lord. He said we should go to the world and proclaim the gospel. And even if I'm not going to the streams to proclaim the gospel, because most counterparts like you know the gospel already, we go to address other talking points and the reasons why they give actually that they are atheists, which I think is just a facade or justification which doesn't address the real issue, which I think is pride, is selfishness, is rebellion, and bad will. That's in my understanding. They are suppressing the truth of truth.
Yeah. To be honest, I find, at least in my experiences and in views, I find a lot of Christians that have a lot of hate, deep down hatred towards atheists and atheism, and that's what I find kind of sad. I find that a lot on these channels, that there's some really deep-rooted, real hatred towards it. And
yes, I think this is counterproductive. I try, even if I am not welcome or if people ridicule me, at least I try. I mean, I'm human. I don't always react as it should be, but I try at least to establish breaches and not walls.
yeah. No, that's, like I said, that's what I admire about you. You have the courage to jump into, streams that are very difficult, and and I think that's why a lot of people in this community really care about you, because you're that way. And that's, I wish we could see a little bit more of that. Like I said, this we don't seem to be having the interactions. If you just go back 6 months, I think there's a big difference. A lot of things have really gone downhill in just that short amount of time. It's too bad. You know.
Yeah, but I mean, what I think actually is interesting that on YouTube there are, I mean, I don't know how many YouTube channels there are out there, but in compared to the size of the World Wide Web and YouTube channels, the community of channels which have these discussions is still relatively small, and it hasn't grown in the last year or so. And I would say this is rather surprising.
Yeah, yeah. I found, what there was, the big debates last night that I listened to on the Tart channel. That was kind of fun. I like those kind of things too. Those are really interesting. There weren't really many actual religious type things. There was some moral things, a little bit of religious debates, but most of it.
On which channel was that?
That was on the the Atheist Round Table, right? Is that the name? Oz's channel.
Oh, okay, yes, yes, yes.
They had the big marathon.
Yeah.
Marathon debate. They
Okay,
did a great job with that. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. It was fun. The last debate was on whether Bigfoot existed. It was really funny.
That would be a good idea if we would do that, don't you think so, Neff? If we would arrange such an episode on any of our
about
channels.
Bigfoot?
No, not about Bigfoot,
Oh.
but making like a series of debates and invite
yeah.
all those
Yeah.
which are involved like this, because I mean,
That's great.
I think that would be a good idea if we would promote something like that.
Sure.
It was. I mean, they did a fantastic job. Oz did an incredible job last night. It's quite an undertaking to do it because there was so many people involved in it. But man, he really did an excellent job, and it was a lot of fun. And that's, I think that's would be one thing to really help the community come together, something like that. Because, like I said, there weren't that many. It was very little religious things. So if you did, like you're talking about, Antangelo, if we created a nice big marathon thing and had it all, Christians and atheists, and had the nice debates in a marathon type thing where you name a champion at the end, and exactly, I don't know, if you check out Oz's channel and watch it and see how he did it. You don't necessarily have to watch the whole thing, but if you watch a little bit of it and see how he did it, if we could do that on another channel with, like you said, Christians and atheists, that I think that would be a big success.
Yeah.
Maybe bring the community closer together a little bit.
Yeah, maybe even at MDD's channel. Who knows?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I think that if the people that would participated in it, don't take it so seriously. Just try to come on it with, let's have fun and let's enjoy, the competition and as just more as kind of treat it as a sporting event more so than an actual, and I think that would really lighten things up, and that's the way they did it, and it was great. It was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, it's almost 3 hours that I am live here
Yeah.
on the stream, so I think it's about time to close it.
Okay, Antangelo, thank you so
Okay,
much for
Antangelo.
having me.
Yeah, take
I
care,
really
buddy.
enjoyed it. Thanks,
Okay,
Neff, for the
cool.
conversation. I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it.
Okay,
Hope to
so
see you again soon.
everyone
Okay,
here
guys.
in the side chat, thank you for being here at my channel, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.